Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by energy and environment reporter Breanne Deppisch. Breanne, President Biden, in the final days before the midterm elections, has picked a very old but familiar fight. He's going after big oil again. What sort of is at play here? Why has this become an issue again after they'd kind of been doing a victory lap on the gas prices for a few weeks?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right that this is a very familiar refrain. You and I have discussed this many times. But the reason it's kind of brought more into the spotlight is, obviously with the looming midterm elections, but more importantly, just because the third quarter, oil companies just posted their profits. And while they weren't quite as strong, as the record-breaking numbers seen in Q2 this year, all the super majors, the oil and gas super majors, more than doubled at least their profits from the second quarter of the previous year, or from the third quarter of the previous year. So, still huge gains there. Oil prices have abated a tiny bit, but not by much, and the cost of refining is also still really high, which has allowed them to profit, in a way that Biden does not like.
Yeah, he used some pretty strong language about it. He said they were essentially war profiteers, or profiting off of Russia's war in Ukraine. He accused them of not passing on savings to consumers while they were engorging themselves with profits. Biden has kind of used some of this rhetoric before, but he really went after them, I think, this time.
Yeah, I actually think this was his strongest language yet. His White House remarks on Monday were, he certainly did not mince any words.
Sure.
And he also called on Congress to pass, a windfall profit tax,
right,
which, would be a pretty significant move. And, oil and gas companies say could actually really hurt their bottom line.
And, he would need Congress to do that, and he may lose Congress. Presumably, though, there would be a lame duck session. But even under the current Congress, had some trouble getting stuff, particularly climate-oriented stuff, before the reconciliation bill passed.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of skepticism on the Hill to actually, pass something like this, despite the urges from Biden and others in the administration. And that's because, for a couple of reasons, I think the oil and gas companies say that it would actually have the windfall profit tax would allow the government to essentially take back, claw back a portion of the profits, redistribute it to consumers over a certain period of time. But, obviously by taking those profits away, the company's argument is that that would disincentivize more production. At the same time, Biden has called on these companies to produce more and drill more. Their argument is basically, well, why would we do so if we're not even going to profit, from these gains?
Right. So with all of the energy problems and high prices here in the United States, the situation is even, or at least it has been, even more dire in Europe, and you've written some about this. But has recently been some cause for optimism or some good news. What have you learned?
Yeah, so actually, the first bit of good news we've had in a while on this front, Europe has seen a very mild October. Actually, I think they've just shattered records everywhere from Scandinavia to Spain. Talked to a number of meteorologists ahead of their long-term winter outlooks, and they say that they are poised for a really mild winter, which is great news, and also will help them stop them from tapping into their gas storage tanks. As you remember, European leaders were in a race to really fill those to capacity before the winter season. There were a lot of dire warnings that they might not make it through the winter if it was especially cold. But so far, gas remains completely full. I believe across the EU, the storage tanks are filled to 95% capacity. In Germany, which was the biggest importer of Russian natural gas, has an even higher storage rate of 99%. And that's because consumers just really aren't needing to heat their homes.
Sure.
We've seen temperatures in the 90s in Spain in the end of the month, and the 80s in France. Just really abnormal temperatures that more closely resemble summer than they do fall.
Right, definitely. So does that buy them any time to do anything to prepare for winter when presumably it will ultimately at some point get colder?
It does, and here they're kind of faced with an interesting calculus because they're out of storage. They're not using any gas, so the storage tanks are just completely full.
Right.
And I spoke to a natural gas analyst in Europe yesterday who told me that buyers are actually making these interesting decisions, and some of them are actually choosing to use storage facilities in Ukraine or either sell gas to Ukraine or store it there. Obviously, a big geopolitical risk, given that Russia, is taking aim at their energy and critical infrastructure.
Right. I mean, they're hitting power grids. They're hitting. That does seem a little risky.
Yeah, exactly. But he said, there's literally no other options in the short term for them. So eventually, we're also expecting a really mild November. Temperatures might drop off a little bit towards the end of the month, but are likely to remain, just really, really temperate, similar to what we saw in October, at least for the first half of the month. And this should save them in the short term. And, in the meantime, we also there was the huge scramble for LNG. Imports
liquefied natural gas.
Oh, yes, liquefied natural gas. And actually, right now, there's so much gas in Europe, I hesitate to use the term oversupply because it's certainly that's in the short term. But there are actually something like 60 LNG cargoes just, kind of floating around near the ports of Europe waiting to offload their gas supplies.
So hopefully they have a no heat November.
Yes, exactly. That's what we're hoping for.
Thank you, Breanne.
Thank you, Jim.
You can read Breanne and subscribe to our daily on energy newsletter at washingtonexaminer.com.